Just Like a Minuteman by Elizabeth Weiss-Volstadt. Thump, thump! Hannah's brown eyes flew open as she awoke. The sky was still black on this April morning in 1775, but a bright moon shone through her attic window. Thump, thump! More pounding on her door. Hannah! It was Ephraim Jones, keeper of the inn and tavern where Hannah was servant girl. Make haste and come downstairs. The redcoats are marching to Concord to see their guns and supplies. I need you to help serve food and drink to the Minuteman. Hannah leaped out of bed and dressed quickly, shivering in the cold night air. The sound of voices drifted up from the tavern window. She wished she could be a Minuteman. Serving meals to the soldiers wasn't very exciting. She wanted to be part of the struggle for freedom too. Sighing, she twisted her long dark hair and pushed it under her cap and hurried down the wooden stairs. Soon she was rushing back and forth from the kitchen to the tavern. She took an extra plate of the previous night's meat pie to Henry Gardner, her favourite guest. Mr. Gardner was an important man with serious responsibilities. He was a treasurer of the Provincial Congress, a group of men who directed patriot affairs in Massachusetts. But he always had a smile for her. Once, while she was sweeping his room, he came home from a meeting carrying a large pouch. He used a big key to open the padlock on a heavy chest in the corner. Hannah looked inside. She saw some papers filled with writing. She also saw stacks of gold coins. Mr. Gardner emptied more coins from the pouch into the chest. Then he closed it firmly and clicked the padlock shut. The future of the colonies might rest in that chest, he said to Hannah. Those coins are tax money from the people. I'm keeping it safe. If we have to fight the British, we'll need every penny. He touched Hannah's shoulders. You can help keep the chest safe. Tell Mr. Jones if you see anyone go into my room. Every day, Hannah made sure Mr. Gardner's door was tightly closed. She watched for anyone entering his room. She wanted to show him and Mr. Jones that she could do her part just like a Minuteman. But her chance never came. Now, as she set his plate before him, Mr. Gardner spoke to her again. I must leave soon, Hannah, he whispered. The British officers must not find me here, but my chest is still upstairs. He leaned in close to whisper. Remember how important it is. Hannah nodded. She wouldn't forget. Just then a messenger flung open the door. The redcoats fired on our men in Lexington and marched on. They're almost here. The Minutemen and other militiamen grabbed their weapons and rushed outside. When the tavern was empty, Hannah climbed the stairs to her room. She stood on her bed to look out the high open window. The sun was up over the hills. She could see the road from Lexington. A company of colonial militia was retreating back to town. Close behind came the British. Line after line of hated redcoats glowed in the early morning sun. There were so many she couldn't count them. The Minutemen and militiamen gathered in the hills around the town. They stood and watched the British soldiers get closer and closer to Concord. Soon, the village square was filled with bright red coats. Hannah's heart began to beat just like soldiers' drums. Search the town, shouted a British officer on horseback. Look for the muskets, cannon, powder and musket balls. Destroy food and tools that an army could use. Hannah watched the soldiers break open barrels of flour. They dumped musket balls into the stream. They piled wooden shovels and tools in the village square. Suddenly, she heard angry voices from the yard below. This is private property, Mr. Jones was saying. You cannot enter. Out of my way, rebel, said a British officer. Then there was silence. Hannah crept down the stairs to the kitchen door. She peered into the jail yard next door. Mr. Jones was lying on the ground. 5 soldiers guarded him, their bayonets glittering in the sun. 2 others searched the yard. They found 3 cannon hidden in a pile of firewood. Throwing the logs aside, they dragged the cannon out and smashed their wheels. Hannah drew back behind the door. She had to think. The officer came back. Search the inn, he ordered. Hannah's mind raced. Maybe I can't help Mr. Jones, she thought, but I can do something. I can hide Mr. Gardner's chest. She dashed back up the stairs and slipped into Mr. Gardner's room. She closed the door, then tried to hide the chest behind it. She shoved and shoved until her muscles ached, but the chest was too heavy to move. Loud footsteps clomped up the wooden stairs. They stopped outside Mr. Gardner's room. Hannah ran to bolt the door just as it flew open. A British soldier stood in the doorway. "Move aside," he said. "I want to search this room." Hannah's heart pounded, but she blocked his way. "This is my room," she blurted out. "There's nothing here." "I'll look for myself," said the officer. He grabbed Hannah's arm. She thought of Mr. Jones lying on the ground downstairs. She thought of the Minutemen. They needed more men and supplies, and this chest could provide money for both. She didn't move. "You can see from here," she said. "The room is empty. There's just a bed and my chest." "I'll look inside the chest. Hand me the key." Hannah's stomach turned over. She had no key, but she pretended to look in her apron pocket. Another soldier came. "What's taking so long?" he demanded. "We're finished here. We let the innkeeper go." The first soldier pointed into the room. "I want to open the chest," he said. Hannah's hands were shaking in her apron pocket. I can't find the key," she said. The soldier held up his musket. "Then I'll break the lock." "Wait," said the other soldier. "The officers are already angry because some soldiers have stolen private property." The first soldier put down his musket. His eyes stayed on the chest. The second soldier spoke again. "What could be in a young girl's chest?" Hannah could see he wanted to leave. "Just my church-going dress and my grandmother's shawl," she said. "I'd show you if I had my key. I could see if I dropped it in the kitchen." The soldier laughed harshly. "I don't think our officers want your grandmother's shawl." He turned and walked towards the stairs. The first soldier looked from Hannah to the chest and back to Hannah. Her knees trembled. Her hands shook behind her apron, but her eyes stayed still and calm. Finally, the soldier turned and stomped down the stairs. Hannah bolted the door and sank to the floor. Her trembling legs could hold her no longer, but she had done it. She had saved Mr. Gardner's chest. She closed her eyes and leaned heavily against the door. Minutes later, she leapt to her feet, gripped by a new fear. The smell of smoke drifted through the room's open window. She raced upstairs to her attic room, where she could see the village square. A bonfire blazed, sending smouldering ashes into the sky. Soon the fire spread to the roof of the nearby courthouse. Through the smoke, Hannah could see the Minutemen and militiamen leave the hills. They must have seen the smoke too. They marched toward the British soldiers at the North Bridge. They were coming to save the town. Then she heard the sound of muskets firing. Still, the colonials kept coming across the bridge. Hannah knew there was no turning back now. The fight had begun. Much later, when the sun had set, Minutemen drifted back into the tavern. They were tired and dirty, but their spirits were high. They smiled as Hannah poured cold cider from an earthen pitcher. "We showed those redcoats," said one, holding up his glass. "We chased them back to Boston." "A job well done," said Mr. Jones, as he placed a pot of stew on the table. "I'm proud to serve you all." Then he took the pitcher from Hannah and pointed to an empty place on the wooden bench. "Come, sit," he said to her, pouring another glass of cider. "I'm proud to serve you too." He turned to the Minuteman. "Hannah is also the brave soldier. She told me how she kept the redcoats from opening Henry Gardner's chest. Now the money to supply our army is safe." Hannah sat down and slowly drank the sweet cider. A wide smile spread across her face. Tomorrow she would be a servant girl again. But today she was a brave soldier, just like a Minuteman.